The 2022 NFL Draft is nearly 2 full years into their careers, and we are really starting to see what players will be stars from this class, and unfortunately which players are currently draft disappointments. But in today's video, we will be talking about players that were drafted outside of the first round that are considered steals from this class. Whenever you think of the 2022 draft class, you may think of one of the most discussed players, for better or worse amongst NFL fans, and that is Mr. Irrelevant himself, Brock Purdy. But Brock wasn't the only draft steal from this class, and in fact there are several players that have more than proved to be worth the late round selection their franchise spent on them. This video is titled 4 of the biggest steals from the 2022 NFL Draft, but stick around to the end and we may have some bonus steals from this class. There is a lot to dive into with each player, and with that preface out of the way, let's begin. We are starting today's video with Rams running back Kiron Williams. Kiron was a 5th round pick out of Notre Dame in 2022 and was not much of a contributor in his rookie year. He played in 10 games and started a grand total of 0 of those games and ran for 139 yards on 4.0 yards per carry. He took a big, and I mean a major, leap between last offseason and this year, and in just 12 games played, he has over 1,100 yards and 12 rushing touchdowns and has played a major role in the Rams' success. Now, when you think of the 2023 Rams, you may think of another 5th round draft steal by the name of Puka Nacua, and Puka has been a draft steal for them, I mean, obviously, right? But to give you an idea of how much Kiron has stepped up for the Rams this year, they are 8-4 in games he plays and 1-3 when he does not play. He missed some time between the Week 6 Cardinals game and the Week 12 Cardinals game, so 4 games total as there was a bye week in there, and the Rams went just 1-3 and averaged just 14.3 points per game. They put up just 57 points in those 4 games, and for reference, they have put up 326 in the other 12 games they've played for an average of 27.2 points per game. Now, to at least be fair here, Brett Rypien started one of those games, so naturally having a backup quarterback and running back on the road in a game where you put up just 3 points will heavily skew the averages, but even if you want to take that game out, the Rams averaged just 18 points per game without Kiron in the 3 other games. The Rams entered their Week 10 bye with a 3-6 record and beat the Seahawks without Kiron in Week 11, and since Kiron has returned to the starting lineup, they have went 5-1 and have averaged 31.3 points per game in his return, and the only loss they have in there is a loss in Baltimore to the Ravens, so I don't think that's a bad loss by any means. In those 6 games, Kiron has 688 rushing yards along with 6 rushing touchdowns, and has even contributed 101 receiving yards and 2 receiving touchdowns. The current 6-game stretch Kiron is on would have him on pace for a 1,900-yard rushing season, along with 23 total touchdowns. To say the Rams drafted a steal in the 5th round of 2022 would be quite the understatement. I do believe Kiron is a big reason for the Rams' success, and is also a big reason they are a team nobody wants to play as we enter the postseason. I had serious concerns with the Rams entering the 2023 season because, as 2022 suggested, with Kiron only getting 44 touches in his rookie year, I didn't think they would have much of a run game for the 2nd consecutive year. In 2022, the Rams finished 26th in rushing attempts, 27th in rushing yards, and 27th in yards per carry, and I thought it would be much of the same in 2023. But it hasn't been, and that's due in large part to Kiron. Oh, and guard Kevin Dotson, who they absolutely stole from the Pittsburgh Steelers. The 2023 Rams are 12th in rushing attempts, 10th in rushing yards, and 8th in yards per carry. Kiron is only 23 years old, and by having a player like Kiron, this only extends the Rams' window of seriously competing because it makes everyone's jobs, including both Matt Stafford and Sean McVay, a lot easier, and they can lean on him as the season goes on. He is 2nd in the NFL in rushing yards behind only a guy by the name of Christian McCaffrey, and is 3rd in yards after contact this year. He has also forced 51 missed tackles, which is good for 6th in the NFL, and this is a perfect example of why teams will throw darts at late-round running backs, because Kiron Williams is the perfect example of a late-round steal. Next up is a player who has taken just 3 picks after Kiron, and it's Cowboys corner Deon Bland. Deon had a great rookie year for a corner selected in any round, let alone the 5th round, as he had 5 interceptions that had over 50 tackles and was a good player for Dallas. But he was in a class with a guy who completely takes away a side of the field in Sauce Gardner, and Sauce would go on to be a first-team All-Pro as a rookie. Not only is Sauce in the 2022 class, but so is Reek Woolen of the Seahawks, who, while yes has had a bit of a sophomore sophomore slump, still managed to pull down 6 interceptions as a rookie last year. So when there's not one but 2 guys that had great rookie seasons at the cornerback position in your rookie year, you're naturally not going to get discussed as much as the other guys. But Bland has had a phenomenal year in 2023 and is leading the league with 8 interceptions, and of course you knew this was going to be mentioned, 5 pick sixes. Now, with corners, the one thing fans want after a corner starts to get a little buzz and starts to make a name for himself at the NFL level, well, naturally fans want to see a guy get exposed and give up a big play or even 2 in the same game. Deon did exactly that against the Seahawks, as he was credited with allowing 169 yards and 2 touchdowns in this game, but in Deon Bland fashion, he still managed to pull down an interception. Even with this bad of a game, opposing quarterbacks' passer rating when throwing at Bland in 2023 is just 52.1, and for reference, the passer rating for a quarterback to spike a ball every single snap is 39.6. So there's not much of a difference between spiking the ball and throwing it in Bland's direction, except the opposing team may get a defensive touchdown out of it. Cowboys fans were understandably distraught when star corner Trevon Diggs tore his ACL in practice back in September, as they more or less thought the season was over given how many number 1 receivers they would have to play down the stretch. But Bland has more than answered the call, and so has Stephon Gilmore for that matter too. Outside of the Seattle game, Bland has allowed 503 receiving yards in 15 games for an average of 33 yards per game, and like we mentioned with the 5 pick sixes, he has as many touchdowns as former Super Bowl MVP Cooper Kupp. Bland is just 24 years old, and obviously every year won't be like this for moving forward, as 5 pick sixes simply isn't sustainable, but it's no coincidence he had 5 interceptions as a rookie and 8 interceptions as a second-year player. When Dallas made this selection, they were hoping for a guy who could be a good rotational corner and come in and spot start if a guy like Trevon Diggs missed a game or 2, for example, but they received much more. Not only did they receive a ball-hawking corner, but Bland isn't afraid to tackle either and has just 6 missed tackles in all of 2023. He has a missed tackle rate of just 8.1%, and for reference, fellow 2022 draftee Sauce Gardner has a missed tackle rate of 16.9% this year. Not only does Sauce have a high missed tackle rate, but so does star linebacker Fred Warner, who has a missed tackle rate of 15.8%. This obviously isn't to say Bland is a better player than either of those guys, but he is much more than a one-trick pony. Not only is he more than a one-trick pony, but Bland is one of the biggest draft steals less than 2 years later. Next up may be a surprising player, but this gentleman has played a big part in the success the Colts have had in 2023, and it's left tackle Bernhard Raimann. Raimann was an older prospect in the 2022 draft, as he is from Austria and only began playing American football at 14 years old. He was an exchange student during his junior year of high school and eventually returned to Austria and completed his service in the Austrian military. He then committed to Central Michigan after his military service was completed, and to make a long story short, he turned 25 years old during his rookie season, and anytime a rookie turns 24 or even 25 during their rookie year, there is always a note next to their draft profile, and especially for a smaller school offensive lineman. I liked Bernhard as a prospect, and I'll preface this with for what he was as a prospect, because I'll be honest, I didn't think he was going to be as good as he has been for Indy, but I like the idea of him as a developmental tackle, and that maybe a team would get 3 or 4 years of solid play before he turns 30 and then take it year by year from there. But in 2023, Raimann is the highest pass blocking grade out of any lineman from his draft class, which also includes Ravens center Tyler Linderbaum. Believe it or not, Bernhard actually has the 3rd highest pass blocking grade out of any lineman from any of the previous 3 draft classes, with only having the Chargers' Rashawn Slater and the Vikings' Christian Darrisaw above him, meaning per PFF, Raimann actually has a better pass blocking grade in 2023 than the Lions' Penei Sewell. Raimann has improved across the board from 22 to 23, and he has allowed less sacks in 2023, despite playing over 150 more snaps than he did as a rookie. He allowed 7 sacks on 428 pass blocking snaps in 2022, which equates to 1 every 61 snaps, and he has allowed just 4 sacks on 591 pass blocking snaps in 2023, or 1 in every 148 pass blocking snaps. Bernhard allowed a season-high 5 pressures in Week 14 against the Bengals and even allowed 2 sacks in that game. Like we did with Deon Bland, we will discuss how good Bernhard has been outside of one bad game. I like doing these types of comparisons because no matter who the player is, everyone has bad games. Everyone. period. Having said that, outside of those 45 pass blocking snaps against the Bengals, Bernard has allowed 2 sacks on 546 pass blocking snaps in all of 2023. We often discuss how having a quarterback on a rookie contract is crucial for team success, and it is, and I think Anthony Richardson will be a good quarterback for the Colts over time, but having a franchise left tackle is just as critical for any quarterback, whether it be AR or Gardner Minshew. Ryman was selected in the middle of the 3rd round and was the 9th tackle off the board in the top 77 picks alone. Indy has been known for their good offensive line play over the last few years, and a lot of that of course has to do with Big Q, but Bernard has more than made his impact. He took a jump as a player in 2023, and Indy looks to have their left tackle for the next several years. Next up is a player you may not initially think of, but it's a player that's been hot recently, and it's George Pickens of the Steelers. George flashed potential during his rookie years. He had 800 yards and made one of the best catches you'll see against the Browns in a primetime game. I really thought entering the year that the sky was the limit for George as long as his quarterbacks could get him the football, which, as we know, was a problem for a lot of 2023. Over the last 2 games, George has tacked on 11 receptions for 326 yards and 2 touchdowns, and this outburst has pushed him to number 12 in the NFL in receiving yards, behind Jamar Chase of the Bengals, despite having over 30 less targets. I love George coming out of Georgia, and I thought this was a classic case of focusing on a player's limitations rather than what a player is good at, and we'll see that with the 2024 draft class, as there will be guys I am significantly higher on than the national media. I thought George was a good receiver, and when a guy has the tools George has, just throw him the ball and figure it out later. Pickens was the 11th receiver taken off the board and was picked 2 spots after Tyquan Thornton of the Patriots. A late 2nd round pick isn't normally a steal, but for as good as George has been in 2023, when targeted of course, along with the value the Steelers received relative to what other teams did not receive and the receivers they took over George, makes him a pretty big steal less than 2 years later. There were not 1 but 2 good players taken after the 250th draft pick, which is pretty insane in itself, and the first we will mention is Isaiah Pacheco. In less than 2 years, Pacheco has ran for nearly 2,000 yards and 12 touchdowns, and has 3 100-yard games this year alone. He was the final running back drafted in this class, and he is a consistent downhill runner. Pacheco has 20 runs of 10 or more yards in 2023, which ranks 17th in the NFL, and that's fitting for him. He's a grinded out back, and there's no doubt both Pat and Andy love when he gets going, because he gets stronger as the game goes on and makes everyone's life easier. You had to know Brock Purdy was going to be mentioned in today's video, as Mr. Irrelevant himself is the textbook definition of a draft steal and has thrown for over 4,000 yards and 30 touchdowns in 2023. Purdy's success has allowed the 49ers to trade Trey Lance and continue to build the roster and be in this window with Brock Purdy making significantly less money than other NFL quarterbacks. He has a career passer rating of 111.4, and there is a very real chance the 49ers play in the Super Bowl this year, and I wouldn't be surprised if they win the Super Bowl with Mr. Irrelevant at quarterback. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and if you did, please like and subscribe, as only about 36% of people watching are subscribed, and it helps the channel tremendously. Until next time, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.